We seek to liberate humanity from the violent institutions that rule and degenerate our race. This means we also seek to free humanity from the violent viewpoints of reality that have been embedded into our minds by these institutions as a measure for them to maintain control. Humanity's perception is manipulated by these violent forces on conscious and unconscious levels, yet it is this perception that makes up the sum of all human action. All human action being synonymous with economics, the mental health of individuals is a root influence of our strategies to create freedom in this world. Encouraging humanity to act in freedom is encouraging humanity to think and feel and love in freedom, all activities that are discouraged by the powers that be, for a clever reason. We seek structures that are more free, but to achieve this, we need to be more free to be able to visualize and consistently create structures that are truly going to be better. This means if we take responsibility for our actions, then perhaps we must accept responsibility for our internal states as well. And this work proves more challenging, yet more worthwhile. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And that's a pretty popular quote by Carl Jung, but it's so true through and through and through and through. Creating freedom must be more than a good intention. Because even the most wicked and ignorant have good intentions, and history shows that blind compassion can be just as destructive as blind hatred. So to truly make a positive impact, not only on yourself but on the others and on the world around you, one has to be brave enough to actually go within themselves and see their unconsciousness and shine light upon their own darkness and upon their own evil and resentment, which we all have within us. And until you acknowledge this and accept this, you cannot really transcend this. And this hard work is how we can liberate ourselves from self-destructive, ignorant, malevolent, greedy, insensitive, and blind behavior that, again, was within all of us. And these negative behaviors sabotage not only individual lives, but collective movements. And so we must be aware of this when we're trying to put our intentions of creating freedom out into the world. It is consistent in our Agorist strategy to be the change we wish to see in the world, not only on a physical level, but I really think this also means on a mental level, on an internal level of freeing yourself from this collective mental mode which condones violent conditions, among many other self-destructive habits. It's encouraging this internal freedom, this individuality, and most people are not very internally free. They live in active or passive fear in their day-to-day lives, which leaves very little room for them to even think about the broader concerns of humanity and to think about their human rights and their freedom and all of these things. And this is, of course, kind of intentional. They don't want people really exploring their individuality and liberating themselves from these collective molds that the institutions want people to sort of subscribe to. The move towards freedom is more than physical, it's internal, where all this liberation and drive for freedom comes from in the first place. And it's important to realize that the current violent power structures are in place not just by force and violence alone, but by this perpetuating engineered ignorance. It's really this ignorance and this fear that's sort of keeping it all in place. And for those who can visualize a new paradigm where it's not based in violence, but in voluntary agreement and human innovation, we are the pioneers of a post-political world. And we are creating the initial momentum towards a humanitarian vision, which is a world made up of new kinds of communities. And we can visualize this paradigm of different decentralized communities that operate on voluntary actions and agreements, rather than the current structures which solely rely on needless force, violence, and again, that deeply instilled ignorance. So we must realize that this is truly a remarkable and archaic development, and it's greater than ourselves, because it's the onset of a completely new paradigm, and it's already being set into motion now by the people who can visualize it. So to truly make a positive landmark for freedom and peace, these movers and shakers of this movement must be mentally healthy and strong and adaptable. And this is especially true as humanity grows even more complex and intricate and chaotic. There's lots of crazy, weird things happening now, but it's only the beginning. And so the people who are actually trying to reduce the suffering of humanity and carve out these intelligent and compassionate solutions, these are the people that I really hope are strong, like grounded into the earth like roots of a tree in a storm, if that makes sense. Flexible and strong and grounded despite all of this craziness that's happening, and going to just keep getting crazier with the media and the state and all of these institutions. A lot of people still can't visualize this decentralized paradigm, but all new and radical ideas always cause friction to the status quo of the masses, and so this is not anything to be discouraged by. We need not be afraid to free ourselves from this collective mold, for the true movers and shakers of this world are not masses of ignorant and willing followers, but those who have the integrity and the willpower to actually explore their individuality and create something powerful. And that being said, on the other hand, it is the daily small actions of billions of people all over the world that is the sum of the economic and political paradigm. And together, these concepts demonstrate the real power right now of an individual who is not afraid to kind of stand out and speak the truth in an intelligent and articulate way. Because these movers and shakers are the people that will influence the following masses, which will influence the sum of all human action. It's not the political elitists anymore that are the main influencers. It's really, thanks to technology and this information decentralizing, it's really the people who have this vision, and the people who are sort of willing to carve out this excellence, who really more influence the people around them. And we are already seeing a shift as things are changing. So I really think this is a fertile time for those individuals who can even vaguely see this humanitarian vision to put the work in that they feel called to do. And on a deep level, this is what Agorism is all about. It's about contributing your piece of the puzzle, no matter how grand or small, to this new world that you want to create, rather than mindlessly feeding this old paradigm which relies on you and your complacency. The individual is truly more empowered than ever in this age, and it's worth really just contemplating on how much things have changed even just in the past 5 years. And the results of an individual who dares to take the energy to know and heal himself, to discover his gifts and his weaknesses, and to commit to a life of goodness and trying to reduce suffering, which really does aid in the clearing of the mind and the heart for growth. Otherwise, you're just going to be acting out this resentment, and that's just going to make everything worse. And it already is. And the individual who will consciously use and direct their energy and money and business and talents and creativity and all these facets of human expression to create the world that they want to see, we can see profound effects from this, rather than just mindlessly supporting this conventional reality which is constructed by the state for its preservation. And it's so true that you create your own reality in so many ways, and there's a lot of freedom in this, and we all do, and it all influences each other in a very interconnected manner. And this realization creates fertile grounds for transformative change, both on an individual and a collective level. And so naturally this proposes such a great menace to existing power structures, which not only seek, but they must, for their survival, influence the perception of reality of the masses. And so that's kind of hinting at this sort of war on consciousness, on critical thinking, on reasoning, on creativity, and just the ability to think for yourself and experience your life how you truly want to. And that's kind of what I'm trying to talk about, is detaching from this collective mold that they paint of the world on the news and in all these facets of their content. It's just not accurate. It's not an accurate depiction of what the world is, and you don't have to subscribe to that, because the more you subscribe to this picture they're painting, the more it actually sort of manifests, if that makes sense, because it's just that strong influence it has on the mind to create it. But I'm going to talk about that more later. So, building the new. Agorism is using our energy wisely to build the new, rather than trying to fight the old. So, challenging and resisting the state can sometimes be helpful in this process, but the ultimate cause for the demise of the violent state is going to be the state itself. Its unsustainability is inevitable, and those unfavorable factors that have kept its power thriving are most likely going to be the same exact variables that will be the cause of its self-collapsing. It's the violence and the inefficiency, the incompetence, the lack of common sense, the constant victimizing of non-violent people, the contradiction to the wants and the needs of the citizens, the theft of wealth from honest labor, and the list goes on forever. It just seems to receive more resistance, slowly every day, from every direction. It's creating enemies out of people who used to not even care. And this is a process which will take time. And we aim to encourage this questioning of authority, but importantly, we aim to provide solutions and non-violent alternatives to it. Knowledge and implementation of alternative solutions will provide working models of better ideas, which naturally destroys this deeply rooted, often unconscious illusion of state governance being a necessary evil. And again, it has instilled that in the minds of the collective because it has to for its survival, not because it's actually necessary. So we must develop new and intelligent humanitarian structures for people to contemplate, and furthermore for people to start using and benefiting from, especially when if the current one does collapse in on itself. We have to work together, all the people who can visualize this and feel this connection. We need to really unite, despite our differences, to work together towards building this new free market so well that it outcompetes the state. And there's so many possibilities within this. We really don't need to limit ourselves, because with voluntary agreements there's a lot more possible than we might realize. So perhaps we should start thinking about that. And this is sort of how we can work towards actualizing Agorist principles. And in essence, this means working towards consciously accelerating the process of decentralization of power, which is kind of what agorism really is. On a large scale, we are creating a market of decentralized voluntary governance, which will consist of many different kinds of governances for many different kinds of people. It's really a needless setback in this movement to have this common dogma that there can only be one kind of legitimate economic system that just works the best and is the most efficient for the whole world. As agorists, as freedom and peace lovers, as people who are really trying to evolve and find solutions to these violent institutions, we really need to transcend this notion that it can only be one way, because that's not even realistic. In the free market of governance, in which traditional politics is truly extinct, there will be entrepreneurs of many different kinds from all over the world with many different ideas, implementing various kinds of decentralized structures, different kinds of governances. And this is fine so long as they're voluntary, as long as the individual has the freedom to choose to live there or not. And this can range potentially from anarcho-capitalism to communism. And again, the framework of voluntary governance allows for a lot more possibilities than some realize. And just to explain this a little bit more, for example, I am not a fan of communism, and I would never want to live in communism. However, if people who really do support such ideas want to create a community of willing communists on their own private property, their own commune, and it's voluntary participants, how is that my business? It's really not. So long as all the participants are voluntary and they're not coercing anyone, I can coexist with these people, with this governance from afar just fine. We might vary greatly on basically all economic principles, but if we can promote the same idea of creating this decentralized free market of voluntary governance on a large scale, we can still cooperate to free ourselves from the coercive involuntary state, even if we don't share the same exact beliefs. In the free market of governance, we would coexist with lots of different ideas, so long as they don't violate the non-aggression principle. It's characteristic of any good market to have many choices available, and in this way the market of governance is no different. And actually, a variety of voluntary economic structures is actually beneficial for the movement towards freedom from illegitimate coercive governance, because it creates multiple models of decentralized startup societies, and not all startup societies are going to be the same at all, and not all of them are going to be successful. In the nature of the free market, the ones that are faulty, that are inefficient or violent or not so user-friendly, will fail, and ultimately will prove as helpful experiments and lessons in modern governance. So going back to the communism example, if it is true that communism can't work, not even with only voluntary participants, what better way to finally prove this axiom true than to let it play out on its own under voluntary agreements and let the results speak for themselves? How would we finally let communism or any faulty system die than to let, for example, those who say real communism has never been tried, to go off on their own and build their idea and create what they think real communism is, which is probably different to almost every person. and again, let the results speak for themselves. If we truly want to manifest a new paradigm of voluntary governance, we must open our minds to the broader spectrum of humanity and realize we don't have to always be up against those who disagree with us. And if both parties can simply respect the principles of voluntary agreement, regardless of all their other economic and political ideas, it's possible they could cooperate quite harmoniously. I mean, in many ways, I would consider myself an anarcho-capitalist, but I can't be so entitled to think that that form of governance is going to work for all people of all cultures, of all geopolitical regions, of all time, everywhere. Humanity is far too diverse for that kind of universal global mentality. And you would think an anarchist would realize this. If we want to manifest a decentralized paradigm of governance, we must be able to visualize, at least vaguely, what we're trying to create. And in doing that, we also need to have some humility and be realistic concerning the nature of humanity. And if your ideal system is so great, perhaps you can work on creating a model of it with voluntary participants, and you might just see amazing results. Yet you can't force your good idea on people. Even ideologically, it's probably not going to work in your favor. So if it really is a good idea, keep building it. And people will come when they're ready. So all of this being said, with so many shifts in the consciousness of humanity, I truly believe now is the time that as a movement of freedom and peace lovers, we work together to build this counter-economy on a large and a small scale that is more peaceful, efficient, and prosperous. And I really want to emphasize unity and cooperation in this. It's hard for anyone, let alone anarchists and activists, to get along. But it's truly the only way this can work. It's a market. It's a market of people, of individuals. And especially in its young phase, this market is dependent upon doing peaceful business with each other and supporting each other. And this is how we can decentralize power. There is a lot of work to be done by individuals, but this also means building that network and that community and connecting and building your own local community and relating to other people, communicating on a level that they can actually understand. And going back to this internal influence of action, this means if you want to see progress, cultivating patience and humility, because realistically, a lot of people are still scared and confused and angry, and they can't visualize this paradigm. And I mean, a lot of it is, of course, going back to this manipulation, generations of propaganda from the state. So if you come at them with that same angry and confused and fearful mentality, there's really not much logic in how you expect to get anything productive done. It's not always necessary to shove your principles down people's throats for them to realize that they're self-governed. And again, our inner states often reflect our outer states. And so we should remind ourselves that those who can't perceive external freedom and human rights are likely suffering within their own bondings and their individuality. So it might be worthwhile to try to have some understanding and compassion, because we all suffer from various problems of self-worth like this, And this common neurosis in many ways goes back to the state's influence in the first place. So being aggressive, even ideologically, to uneducated statists is often like shitting in your own nest. Because it is their responsibility to get their mind out of the hands of cultural engineers, but you know that state mental manipulation is strong. And there was a time when you didn't know what you now know either. High power structures clearly do not want people to know who they are or what they're really worth. They want to lead people into this collective cesspool of unclaimed negativity where feeble minds go to get their souls slowly sucked out of them. So if you truly want to spread this change, this positive change of peace and freedom, perhaps you won't beat down those who are still under this control, but realize it's the root of it is the very thing you're trying to change. And by feeding into their negativity, you're perpetuating the very paradigm you say you're trying to transcend. So maybe it's worth finding a new approach. I know it's really hard. I'm easily frustrated by statists, especially when they're super negative. So I know it's not easy. However, it is true that with more freedom comes more responsibility. This is true on an internal level, as true as it is on the external level. And so it's your prerogative to be consistent with your principles. Together, practicing the many different strategies of agorism, of alternative strategies to traditional politics, this can free us of politicians, because it simultaneously siphons the power and the illusion of legitimacy from the state, making it weaker, because the state is not a god. It's not a self-perpetuating being. It's a group of people. And it consciously redirects this economical energy towards building a collaborative vision of a better structure, which makes this alternative stronger while also making the state weaker. And in this process, it seems to create a mechanism even for the transition of these two very different paradigms. And this transition aspect is important because a lot of people can't visualize how we would implement voluntarism into reality. But building this counter-economy creates ripples of decentralization of power in ways that can actually create a very helpful bridge, especially when multiplied by many different individuals. And it's that twofold strategy of making the state weaker, but also building a new alternative to outcompete it. And that's why building the new is such an important part of our strategy. And as agorists, we are creating this counter-economy. We are laying this groundwork down while it's still challenging and frictional to the status quo and the law, in hopes of creating an economy that one day is not only more peaceful and humanitarian, but more efficient, a market that is so prosperous where even the average docile citizen would rather use and benefit from this counter-economy than from the violent, coercive state economy. And again, this is how we can create a structure that outcompetes the current conventional state. The idea is that people will come for the better service and stay for the decentralized revolution. And again, it's helpful in this process because we're working on something so complex and massive here. So it's helpful to start trying to really visualize this goal. And of course, being overconfident can be a fatal mistake, but having this vision and this degree of healthy optimism will prove very useful in actualizing a decentralized paradigm of governance. If you think about it, the one thing that all entrepreneurs will have in common is that they actually had a lot of faith that their crazy vision would work. So we need to have that sort of spirit. We need to actually believe in this and not be so cynical, because that's another thing of the collective mold. I mean, you see it on the media. They want people to be so cynical that they don't even think it's worth trying. But we need to have hope and faith in this vision. We need not be discouraged by the naysayers, because it's really their own illusion. So we don't need to let that, we should observe it, but we shouldn't let it discourage us. Because this vision of peace and unity and freedom is one that has seen more resistance than any of us could even fathom. And it's outlived, yet this vision has outlived all men and all tyrants and all totalitarian governments, all this suffering and all the defeat that just haunts our human history. It's outlived all of it, and it will continue to do so. And in fact, over time, it seems to only get stronger, and especially with a higher quantity of brave individuals that dare to believe in it. People mock faith, but don't realize that it's actually something that's very hard to have and cultivate. And furthermore, it's very powerful. The grip that the state has on the general perception of humanity through generations and generations of propaganda and brainwash and influence, it's strong, and it's a root obstacle of our goal. Dominating institutions lead people to live and perceive this gray reality where we are powerless and society is hopeless and war is perpetual. All people are just evil, worthless bastards. Life is meaningless. You have no purpose or gifts or anything, etc., etc., etc. The picture of reality that the mainstream media paints, again, is not only inaccurate, but terribly boring and dull and pathetic, so meaningless. And to achieve any kind of freedom, people must break free of this psychological mold. And yet many people are consciously and unconsciously living this perspective without realizing that it's always been in their power to get out of it and actually create something worthwhile with their lives. And that is sort of the meaning of starting to go inside and explore your individuality and break free from this collectivism. And as agorists, this is what we are encouraging, this freedom. I truly believe this. The agorist movement is more, to me, than just economic regimes. It's more than just avoiding taxes and doing business. That's part of it. But it has soul, because it's about living out freedom to create freedom. And to be consistent with such a major task, one has to be a self-aware, conscious, free, and freeing yourself internally is a constant journey. One has to be a conscious individual. Freedom is more than the material world. It reaches way deep within you. And freedom is a way of life, a way of letting go what doesn't serve you and making room for these new creative expressions to manifest. And freedom it's amazing. It's truly everything. And so it's the biggest tragedy that we live in this authoritative machine which suppresses the very inklings of freedom for its survival. And this is degenerating our race again and again and again and again. And for those who can see this and feel this and who have this vision and the integrity and the strength and the willingness to take responsibility for our actions as humans, to walk this path that is riddled with challenges on all levels. It's really up to us to keep building the framework for this new paradigm for ourselves and for generations to come. And we must collaborate together wisely to do this, because nobody can do it alone. And I think it's more about the smaller actions of everyday people than it is about like huge, grand, heroic deeds. The Agorist approach is so powerful because not only can anyone participate, but everyone already does participate, whether they realize it or not. It's just a matter of starting to consciously direct that energy instead of just sort of mindlessly being an autopilot. And this sort of revolution, or involution rather, is going to take time and steady energy. But we need this time because this is our time to really grow and build amazing projects. This is our time to work on ourselves and get ourselves together and be internally strong and adaptable and not get distracted by the chaos of the state media, which again is just going to keep getting more weird and crazy and fear-mongering. I mean, you don't think it can get any worse than it already is, but it can, and it will. I'm sure it will. So we need people to be internally strong and free from that. Because even if you take in that content and you know it's bullshit on an unconscious level, it's still sort of creating how you're perceiving the world around you. So it's important to be mindful of how you're spending your energy and the information you're receiving. Because it's your freedom, it's your responsibility to sort of create your perception of reality. And as an agorist, I also want to say, as someone who's trying to spread freedom and economic liberty and peace and evolution, it truly pays to be patient and compassionate with your fellow beings. I know it's hard. But again, this movement is going to take time and steady energy. A lot of people can still not conceptualize alternatives to what they've always known and what they've again been brainwashed to think. It's like mental poison, really. A lot of people still aren't ready to take responsibility, or they're not ready to have their illusion of reality shattered. And if you've ever had your illusion of reality shattered, you know it's a very difficult time, so much so that the brain even has an unconscious defense mechanism against it called cognitive dissonance. So this is going to take time, but I don't think aggression and resentment is going to really help much, because it's just something that's, we have to build and plant these seeds and let them follow, because their opinions don't stop us from building our ideas. And those who in time do seek solutions and are interested in these ideas, well, they will find them. They will be more than accessible. They already are, especially compared to 5 years ago. You can find way more information on all these philosophies and practices. It's truly amazing. It's truly something to be grateful for, because a lot of people have been working really hard for this, and I appreciate that. But it's just, our country has been so brainwashed and socially engineered for so many generations. The fact that there are any free-thinking people left is a miracle. And I think this number is increasing slowly every day. So if you see the falling of this state by its own incompetent hand as inevitable, then you might agree that our focus as agorists now is to cooperate the best we can together, in any way our individual lives allow us to build this counter economy on all levels we can strong, and let the free market speak for itself. Again, actions will always speak louder than words. We must realize, because this is very liberating, but again, this liberation brings with it more responsibility. We are the movers and the shakers of this world now. It's not the government elitists who lose legitimacy in the public eye every single day. This announcement is not going to be admitted on TV. You're not going to hear it on the news, but look ahead of the curve and you know this to be true. I invite you to detach from this crafted reality of the collective and look around you, and you will find that this is true. So don't be afraid to put in that work now that you feel called to do, because the opportunities are ripe. And the counter economy will take anything it can get, even if you think it's small or insignificant. It's still important, and it could inspire more people than you even realize. We are drawn to create something that is bigger than ourselves, and it follows this primordial vision of peace, despite this friction of the masses who don't yet understand. There's a reason that we are drawn to this. I truly believe that. It's the evolution, and it's hard work, but it's so worthwhile, and it's so meaningful. So if you take anything away from this episode, I hope it's the deep realization that we need to be innovative and wise in how we communicate and collaborate with others in this movement. One does not have to sacrifice their individuality to learn how to work and relate with others effectively, and I think that is important. In the free market of voluntary governance, emphasis on free market, it won't matter so much if your economic principles are different. If they're anarchist or libertarian or socialist or communist or whatever. As long as you resonate truly with the notion that as a race we must evolve past the unnecessary need for violence. Diversity of choices is a virtue of the market. It's not the enemy. And most individuals condemn murder, mass murder, theft, kidnapping, harassment, poison, manipulation, yet these behaviors are considered completely acceptable and legitimate by the mobs who currently run these influential institutions. Those of different ideas could quite possibly cooperate and work together to create something that's so innovative it allows for diversity in principles while still refuting and moving past the unnecessary need for violence and involuntary force. And again, to do this, it's not only moving past the violence, but the ignorance that holds it all in place. And this is how we can begin to visualize and implement voluntarism in reality. With this vision, we can truly begin to build and cooperate and think outside of the box. So thank you all for listening. I know that was a little long. These episodes ended up being longer than I initially intended, but I really want to try to be articulate in explaining these ideas because I think they're very fascinating, and I really want to open up the dialogue for these new ideas and possibilities, start visualizing what we're creating here, because I really think it's that time. We're seeing a lot of shifts in this movement that are very profound. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all feedback, positive or constructive criticism. And if you have a Steemit, my Steemit account is in the description below, and I would love to connect with you on Steemit. So again, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day. Peace.